nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the hood. I just told them be safe in the state.
Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. I'm your host, Too Black. I'm here technically with the whole family. One of us is in the dark somewhere. But what up, everybody? What up, Cameron?
What up? What up?
Hey.
You're definitely
what's going on?
What up, Ryan?
Man, you know, chilling. Can't wait to get this episode. Fuck Jeff Bezos, by the way.
Yeah, that's a running theme.
Coming to you live from my car because I got locked out the house. So, you know, such is life on a Thursday.
Right.
Terrell, what up, man?
What's going on?
Of course, you had to bring your drink into it.
Hey, you know what? I'm just happy that I got somebody sipping right along with me. Thank you, Ryan.
Hey,
You know,
Being a part. Hey,
hear what I gotta do.
I can't leave my brother behind.
Yeah,
gang.
I'm only sipping water, but I just wanted to sip in alignment.
We're all in solidarity. Solidarity sips.
Yep.
Anyway, today's myth is algorithms are colorblind. So we're going to be dealing with tech and racism and capitalism and so forth. But before we go any further, we do want to, send our condolences to the Lukmans. Baba Lukman, he unfortunately passed. For those who aren't part of the Black Power Media Network, Lukman Nation is one of the shows that comes on Black Power Media. And he's one of our elders on the channel, and he suddenly passed. So we just want to send our condolences to the entire family. We're very, very sad to hear this. You go watch the Remix Morning Show on 6/17 of this year, because again, this will be airing a week from when we're recording it. And we did a tribute for him, and we'll be doing other tributes as well on the Black Power Media. Support Black Power Media. Support our Patreon, support everything. But yeah, just wanted to open with that, and just send positive energy to Miss Jackie and everybody in his whole family. The myth is algorithms are colorblind. Has anyone ever heard any versions of this? I'm just curious before we get to it.
Well, the first time I was introduced to algorithms was probably through that documentary, Social Dilemma. And then from Social Dilemma, I remember seeing an article about facial recognitions and how that is biased a couple years ago. And it just feels good to revisit this topic and refresh my memory. But that was my first time actually getting introduced to this topic.
It's the first time I was introduced to, I guess, the topic. Was because I worked in some of the industries that go off of these algorithms or use algorithms where you basically plug information in, the computer computes whatever that's supposed to mean, and then you get your outcome. Exactly. And since I work in the car industry and whatnot, I get to see a lot of it firsthand, and yeah.
I think before I even understood just how deep it got on a tech level, I already kind of knew that we were being tracked and watched, and advertising was based upon the ways in which redlining operates, the type of grocery stores, food chains that pop up in certain neighborhoods you don't see in others. There's like the constant running joke that's not really fucking funny at all, is that the moment that you see a Starbucks or a Whole Foods pop up in the hood, you know your neighborhood is over.
Yeah.
Because gentrification is coming, and that is done so through a data set of how many people are defaulting on loans or how many people are renting, don't own it. Notion of like how things don't just happen overnight, that it's a compilation of folks who have literally sat down at table and really looked at it, thought about it, plotted on it, and then executed. And to us, it just seems simple, but in reality, this has been happening since the beginning of time. Yep. And so just having friends who work in tech and work in advertising in particular, they've always been like, then when you started seeing stuff online, like people, you know, I could be talking about tacos right now and are talking about shoes, and I guarantee you that by tomorrow there will be ads on my Instagram or Facebook that are showing both.
Now you know they'll claim that they're not listening, but they have so much data points that they know that about you.
Right.
Either one is scary. For me, I'm like, I don't really care whether you're listening or you just know that much about me that you just know I'm thinking about it. Either one is scary.
Every time you swipe your credit card,
every time. Every time. It's you know, there's a price to be paid for this convenience, right? So you know, like both of you said, they're tracking you, they're collecting the information, they're storing the data. Yeah, and like Black said, it's scary. It's very unsettling.
And we want to, you know, clarify who they. When we say they, talking about what's known in large scale big data. These are corporations and the state. Well, the state is corporations, but that's another conversation. But and government, I should say, you know, all work in tandem, forming the state to track our information. So that's telecom companies, that is social media companies, that is even companies like Amazon, that's technically just supposed to be a warehouse, but they are all into data. They have contracts with the government, Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter, so on and so forth, and they all trade information. But
all financial companies.
Say what?
All financial companies.
I was about to say that. Financial institutions as well.
You can think of bank,
credit.
Credit, insurance, all that.
Right. So the way it's sold to us is that algorithms are somehow neutral. That they operate on a higher level than humans. So we want to deal with that today. We're going to shout out to Data for Black Lives. It's an organization that deals with racism in tech. That was started around the time that Black Lives Matter just started as a movement in general. I would argue it's one of the best expressions of Black Lives Matter. It doesn't seem to be as corrupted by some of the other forces that have happened in different parts of Black Lives Matter, and they do a good job just staying on purpose with what they said they want to do. So I would say check out Data for Black Lives. So we're gonna go over one of their documents, but first we just want to just read a few words on algorithms and just this whole idea of colorblind. So. Before we even deal with the algorithm thing, I just want to deal with this term colorblind. I don't know if it actually clarifies what's really happening. So yeah, before we address that, it's kind of like, I would say colorblind is kind of a myth within this overall myth. People who claim colorblind is typically people who claim they don't see race. They like to say they're colorblind, and their critics like to call them this as well. As in the skin color doesn't define who people are. They like to hijack Martin Luther King with, the whole content of your character and all of that. So this becomes a question of, is blindness, a disability, the most accurate way to define what's happening? In an essay with a very long-ass title, it's called Conceptualizing Color Evasiveness Using Disability Critical Race Theory to there's that word, critical race theory, to expand colorblind racial ideology in education and society. It was by Sabina Ansi Nama, Daryl D. Jackson, definitely a black dude, and Deb Morrison. They offer the answer to my question as far as what's happening. They say specifically, the racial ideology of denying the significance of race should not be equated with the blindness because it is an inadequate descriptor. Colorblindness as a racial ideology conflates lack of eyesight with lack of knowing. Said differently, the inherently ableism in this term equates blindness with ignorance. However, inability to see is not ignorance. In fact, blindness provides unique ways of understanding the world which sighted people have no access. Blind people are knowers. This also obscures how we understand racism to just seeing. The authors later note that calling racial ideology of refusing to acknowledge race colorblindness also implies that racism is perpetuated only through sight and resisted through sightlessness. However, racism is multimodal and is not limited to only one modality. In other words, racism is informed by visuals, graphic, text, speech, and audio. If the inability to acknowledge racism was limited to blindness, then we can assume that racism doesn't impact blind people. However, when we listen to this blind guy I'm about to play, we see a different perspective.
I can pick out dialects and sometimes try to associate them with what race they might be. I wish I could just completely just ignore it, but I can't help it. If I'm walking down the street and I hear a couple of people and they're like aggressively talking to each other, and it's slang and vulgar speech and it's not eloquent, I naturally sometimes think, oh, those people might be black because of their accent. I shouldn't think like that, but there are natural stereotypes out there in the world.
So my point again was, if it was really color blindness, if it was blindness, then blind people would be immune to racism, and clearly that was demonstrated is not the case. So people could be color, as they say, color evasive. I like to say they're color shook because they don't want to talk about it, they want to avoid it, but they're not color blind, and it's really an ableist term to use. So we just want to.
I was about to say that. Yeah, it is an ableist term.
Yeah.
That you brought up a good point, because just because somebody's blind doesn't necessarily mean that it can't define race. There's other senses that they have to be able to, I guess, feel out the world, to be able to conceptualize the world, I should say.
Right.
Are they able to smell a nigga? Does that mean I can I smell it?
Is that Church's? Church's chicken?
This is why we will never get nowhere as a people.
Oh God!
No, niggas over there.
But like the essay said, they said it's sight is only one modality. In other words, racism is informed by visuals, graphics, text, speech, audio. So racism is not just what you're looking at. It's all other types of things. It's not just what you're looking at. It's you. We've seen studies where people don't pass, quote unquote, on paper because of their names. So it's not.
No, that's interesting, because like I had a situation when I was working at a call center, and at call centers you do your best to code switch and put on your white. And this lady Smooth called me out. And she was like, "You sound like a black guy." I was like, "Oh wow, all right."
Yes.
And she don't know which one, like. So he said. So we're not necessarily clown him, but the problem is much bigger than him. When you listen to him talk, he's processing data that equals racism. He says what inarticulate, loud, slang, vulgar speech equals black people. So what you're hearing is him processing the algorithm of racism. This is a similar process that cops go through before they kill black people, which brings us back to the myth. What is an algorithm? Let's define it as a set of instructions that processes available data for a particular outcome. Cops aren't on patrol in your street simply because they're individually racist, but they were put there by a police commissioner who reports back to a mayor who wants to keep crime down so they can get reelected. This is another reason why there's no such thing as bad apples, because cops are simply following orders. Their orders are cogs within an algorithm, similar to a cook following a recipe. Now, if the food tastes like shit, you don't blame the recipe, you blame the cook, a human being. Yet when it comes to technology, we've been taught that the algorithm is somehow separate from human behavior. We're told technology is a key to the future and it can save us from human error, but this provides cover when algorithms inevitably fuck up. So when the dangerous assessment scores are used by judges to determine who should stay in jail and not, or who should stay in jail or not, disproportionately rates black men as more dangerous than white men, regardless of the so-called crime that they say they've committed. We're told to blame it on the algorithm, as if the algorithm isn't based on the data of a history of racist policing. And racist policing is kind of redundant. But when Amazon's facial recognition software until recently, they used to sell to the police, but they put that on hold after they were caught out. And when that software is proven over and over again to be racially biased to the point that it identifies 28 members of Congress, colored members of Congress, as they would say, it identified those people as so-called accused criminals in the database. So those faces matched up with people who were already locked up. we're told once again, blame that on the algorithm, as if facial recognition isn't programmed by human beings, particularly white male human beings, who made the technology an image of themselves. Now, I will say for me, I don't really want facial recognition to recognize me, so I'm good if they keep fucking that up. But that's another conversation. And we hear the same excuses when Google searches for words such as black girls yields hot black pussy at the first hit. This did happen. This is registered in the book Algorithms of Oppression. They typed in black girls. The first thing at the top of the page was hot black girl pussy. Or Google's photo application automatically tagged black people as apes. This when Google first launched their photo application. Or Google Maps searches on the word nigger led to a map of the White House during Obama's presidency.
Oh.
Yeah. So, again, this came from Sophia Umoja Noble. She's the one who wrote the book Algorithms of Oppression, and she documents these things. So blame it on the algorithm disguises the fact that algorithms are created by humans, just like recipes and just like the orders given to the cops. Human beings feed the machines its ingredients. Machines don't behave separately from humans. In closing, systems of oppression are algorithms in action. It's a certain logic put in motion that guides everyone involved. Capitalism must exploit labor. White supremacy must maintain white power. But none of these things are mysterious monsters in the sky, uncontrollable to us mere mortals. No, they are byproducts of human behavior. So not only are algorithms far from colorblind or color shook, as we're going to call it, they are expressions of the world that we create, created primarily by white people, but are nonetheless part of the world that we live in.
But so basically, the Fed's been watching, and they're going to continue to be watching, and they're watching for a plethora of reasons, all of them are which not good for you, period.
Yeah.
Right.
No, like the facial recognition stuff, that's just like giving up your fingerprints. Granted, you didn't commit a crime. You didn't like register for to get a firearm permit or anything when they do fingerprint you. And you just giving that up by walking down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time you hit that, I agree to the terms and conditions, knowing damn well you didn't read through those terms and conditions, you are agreeing to be tracked. You are agreeing for your data to be used for whatever folks want it to be used. And this goes, and that's not always like the end of the world, some horrific thing that you should just be scared and never agree to the terms and conditions. But it is something to be aware of, that like, they are not new to this. And when I say they, I mean folks that work in advertising, folks that work in the government, folks that work in the business of data. They're not new to this. They are just continuing what has already been done since the beginning of time. They're just using it in more creative ways. And oftentimes those creative ways do not look like ways that benefit us. And the ways that data does benefit us is like the ways in which, for instance, just thinking about COVID, the way we've been able to track in some capacities COVID spread, right? Based on how many folks are getting tested in this area, how many people have been able to get vaccinated in this area, where is it, and been able to tell, is the virus still spreading in these areas or not? And you can track that by, if we know that 200,000 people are getting tested in Inglewood, yet only 50,000 of them are coming back positive, then that we know that transmission rates are slower. We know that 200,000 people in Inglewood are getting vaccinated, and then we're seeing only 20% of the population now is getting COVID, then that is showing that vaccines can potentially work. I don't care if you believe in vaccines or not. I stand with science, fight your mama. But that is how folks have been able to use data to benefit us.
Exactly.
Right.
But the type of ways in which we're going to talk about algorithms today is not in the ways that's actually benefiting us at all.
Right.
Yeah, and this gives like those dystopian novels and films where, the machines take over and everything. It gives it this kind of flair, but at the same time, to your point, Black, these machines are programmed by humans and will follow through anything the humans program it to do, To
your point, Ryan, I was just talking about the movie iRobot, right?
Right.
So, because I was explaining algorithms to my fiance and whatnot, and I was like, in the movie they had the 3 rule system and all that, and this was, the way they talk about algorithms now, where they just blame it on the algorithm, is if the algorithm has consciousness within the AI system, like in the movie where, what was her name?
It's been a long time since I've seen Iron.
Yeah, well, I forget what
we know you talking about. The one that was the smarter one. Yeah.
Yeah, like she developed consciousness and she basically came to the conclusion to preserve human life, you got to put all these niggas indoors and just close, lock and everything, shut everything down. I was like, yeah, but that's the computer actually evolving and, gaining consciousness or whatever. Algorithms are different because, like you said, these are people that are creating a formula, putting information into this formula to get something, to get a result.
Right, and even if a robot does evolve to consciousness, or that's still a robot that is an expression of what human beings chose to do.
Exactly.
That robot didn't come out of somebody's womb. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
That robot was still born from from the things. To kind of just jump into our chapters here, again, we're pulling from the Data Capitalism. It's a report by Data for Black Lives. When Cameron says the beginning of time, what she really means is the beginning of capitalism, because they weren't tracking people, under like communalism. So it's like, so when we talk with capitalism, doesn't just use data to our benefit, like Cameron was saying. There is a benefit to data, right? Like there is a benefit to understanding things. Like, I mean, COVID is a great example. Doctors knowing your medical history is a good example. Again, that's all data. So if you're building something, it's good to know the weather, and having the technology to tell you what the weather is good to have. If you understand soil and you want to plant something, that's another thing that's good to have. So you can, so data is good, but how data gets used is the problem. So again, we're not demonizing data. We're not demonizing algorithms because again, that takes it away from human beings who are actually participating in the behavior, and that's the issue here. In chapter 1 of their report, they just explain, they have the term data capitalism. So it's like, what is data capitalism? They offer essentially that it's they say capitalism is extractive. I wanted to add a little bit though, because they say you've probably noticed that when you buy things, you often pay money to a big company or corporation. While that corporation seems to get richer, their workers don't. That's because corporations keep some of the money and give the workers less. And that's an okay explanation, but I don't think that necessarily explains fully how capitalism works. So if anyone, I'm going to quote a dead white man, but if anyone ever has read Karl Marx and Capital, he frames the term surplus value, which is another way of saying profit. But by surplus value, he's saying if me and Terrell come together and we make something, we make a computer, if we make a phone, the value is in what we made. You can't make value outside of what we made. Like, it's just literally impossible. We make it, that's the value. So to sell it for a higher price than what we made it for, you would have to pay us lower than what the value is of what we made. And that's what capitalism does. It pays you wages, which is lower than the value of the things you're creating. And that's the only way that whoever owns the thing that you're creating under private ownership of capitalism can sell it for profit. And that's what we call surplus value. If we were all making the money based on the value of what we make through our labor, then there wouldn't be any profit, because we would just simply it would be an exchange value, as Marx calls it, or the use value, as in the use value of a computer. That's the value, is whatever the computer does, and the exchange value is whatever I can get back in that. Under capitalism, profits say we're going to pay you a wage because you sold your labor to me as an owner, and then I'm going to use that profit and I'm going to reinvest it somewhere else so I can make money and I can continue to profit as you continue to sell your labor, hoping one day you can be like me, but we know that that's highly unlikely. So that's capitalism essentially when we're talking about profit, and that's what Marx calls surplus value. See, sometimes dead white men actually can help. So when we're talking about data capitalism, again, we were talking about labor. You think about the fact that any of the data that they track is something that's free labor essentially. Like, so If Ryan sits on his phone and is looking at whatever, that's Ryan working. He's producing data, and then his phone tracks it, and then they come up with an ad to give to him, or they sell that information to somewhere else, or if Facebook is tracking it, they're not even going to sell it necessarily to advertisers. They're just going to figure out what are ways we can keep Ryan on Facebook. So there's what they do. They try to nudge Ryan and try, so they know that Ryan likes this. If Ryan is scrolling on his phone and he's looking at video games, and the video games, it could be a sports game, it could be Mortal Kombat, whatever you're into. And if it's on Facebook, they're going to do things to nudge Ryan to keep looking at it, because there's a thing called the attention economy, and attention becomes a currency, because the more they can keep Ryan's attention, the more money they can make. They don't want you to leave their application, so they're going to do whatever they can to keep you on it.
And then hours pass, and I'm going down a wormhole. I mean to say wormhole, rabbit hole, and I keep searching more and more and more, and then, they have more data.
I get annoyed with it.
Yeah,
like especially if I was looking up watches because I wanted to buy a new watch, and I went to one website. Next thing you know, Facebook is sending me all these ads for different watches, and it's like one after another that I scroll past, and then I feel like, oh, you tried to get my attention with that gold one right there. I've been wanting a gold one, and I'm like, nah, I just keep scrolling.
Same here. When I went and bought this computer chair right here, and I've been seeing advertisements all on Facebook for computer chairs nonstop.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and that's just the tip of the iceberg when you really learn how much they track you. But data tracking has a history to kind of set up Cameron here. Like, the data is about how we can prime people to extract more out of their labor. That goes back again to even what Marx was saying, that you're selling your labor to, in a case of just working somewhere, at least you're selling your labor to an owner of some type of company, and that owner is trying to figure out what are different ways that they can maximize the time that you're working so they can get the most production out of you so they can make the most money, right? Like that's the logic. So they need data to know how to do that. What makes this person work longer? What makes this person work harder? What will keep them motivated, and so on and so forth. But the history of doing that, isn't just about a worker-owner relationship in this kind of like typical Marxian lens, but there's also slavery. So, and specifically slavery under capitalism is different than slavery in a different time, because there's a certain maximization of labor. So I'm going to kick it to Cameron to break that part down.
Yeah, so data capitalism is rooted in oppression. And what Data for Black Lives says is that data capitalism, like capitalism itself, reinforces dynamics of power and profits. More power creates more profits, and more profits creates more power. The inequality ensures that companies get richer and more influential, while everyday people wield less and less power. And this loop was just built off the foundation of this very sick ass country in slavery. And so before it was your computer and before it was big business, slavery was how white people and corporations made their money. And being able to have meticulous record keeping skills was highly sought after. Before, it's well known that Thomas Jefferson, little trash ass founding father, was a meticulous record keeper. He had not only every slave that he purchased, sold, dates of the date of purchase, estimated ages, what they ate, who they married or didn't marry, or who he bred them with, tips, finger quotes, tips and tricks that were done to keep not only the enslaved in line, but also for crops. Montebello has, and so before this was all even getting written down on paper, we saw this happening in diaries and journals. Some of the first slave ships that were leaving the continent to come here, those missions and expeditions went absolutely horribly. right? There are plenty of, when we hear about some of the very first slave revolts that took places on ships, we know that folks and our ancestors were not chained underneath the ships. They weren't stacked up on top of bodies initially. At times, folks were shown some minuscule amount of humanity being brought up for fresh air. And, you know, our people did what the fuck they were supposed to do. And they were whooping their asses and burning these ships down and throwing folks over. And other white folks, Spaniards, who had already been doing it, was like, well, yeah, because you're doing it wrong. And so they shared their records of how they transported our ancestors from the continent all over to the New World. And that was some of the first ways in which we saw data actually, New World. I have finger quotes up for y'all that are listening and just can't catch my sarcasm, because as we know, indigenous people were here in the Americas, in South America, and in what we call these stupid ass United States, as well as in the Caribbean. And they were slaughtered off. And that is why there was even a larger need to bring our ancestors here. So, you know, that was some of the first record keeping, which is why when you look at history books and data, you see the ways which slave ships were then reconstructed, the ways in the vast ways in which folks needed to, I say needed with also finger quotes, how they were taught to chain folks, how they were taught to transport folks. And then when we see on plantations specifically, that data set just expanded. They showcased how and which was the correct way to breed a slave. What was the proper rearing age for young children to be able to be sent out into the field? What you should look for in order to braise up, I have my finger quotes up, a strong male that would be suitable for either what they called skilled work, so working in the stables, mill, iron work, or putting folks out in the fields. And this was all utilized so that way other white folks, white men and women who were slave owners, could then continue to commodify our bodies, could continue to talk about how we should be sold, what ages to be sold off. And some of that data was also used to promote things that would then maximize results, right? So folks talk about how our ancestors were able to get married on plantations. That didn't happen because white slave owning folks were being nice. They knew because they were told through either initial trial and error or through the data records of another slave owner, that if you allow the enslaved space to have community and a molecule of happiness, then they'll work harder. If you let a slave teach them Christianity but it's taught in this specific manner, then it will find a reason to live through their suffering more. Because it was also recorded quite a bit, the amount of suicides that were taking place. You hear stories of folks who carried their babies into the lake and drowned them so they wouldn't have to go through that suffering, herbs that were being taken, folks who just refused to allow this continuation of their bodies to be utilized and harmed. And so data from the beginning was not something that was foreign to folks. Letters were being sent of this. There were people who were having meetings to discuss, well, what's working on your nation? Because I'm having these issues over here, Billy Bob. And, this is what I've done. And if that didn't work, this is the person that you sell them to. And if you have old slaves who are just useless and you can't find anything to do, this is a person who is actually seeking out those type of bodies, which we know how medical research was happening. And so data sets initially were the ways in which was then commodified continuously for profit.
And what I'm hearing when you explain your section, the fact that you're dehumanizing people, right? You're looking at them, like you said, as a commodity. You're just a number, a barcode, and just something to extract data from in order to enrich yourself and empower yourself.
And labor, right? extracting
Yeah.
more than anything, you're extracting the labor from the people, and as CBS says, I think in describing anti-blackness, it's value minus worth, and I don't think anything epitomizes that more than what Cameron just described. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah.
And even when slavery ended, that didn't mean that Black folks stopped being profitable to whites, right? And so even thinking about Juneteenth coming up, white folks literally knew that slavery was over and didn't tell slaves because they wanted to maximize their profits as much as possible. It is often stated that they wanted the last harvest to be planted and to be, they were going to let enslaved folks know that they were free, and had to then go about trying to figure out how they were going to manage this. And then we see the ways in which laws came after that, right? And a lot of times I don't think we reflect on how Black folk didn't just magically find a place to go or have ways in which to feed themselves or their families. And white folks knew that. And there were plenty of places in which white folks were just getting their shit burned down, and Black folks were like, we're just gonna take this shit and make it work. But there were plenty of places which then created the sharecropping industry, in which they were like, well, you just come on back and work, then we will give you X, Y, and Z, but then you need to work for this amount of time to essentially pay off a debt. And we know that many people were never able to pay off that debt. And that system was then told to others. That data that was collected from, this is what was working for white folks and profitable for white folks, continued. Then we see how Jim Crow laws come in, and we're like, great, if we can't get you to work for free by enslaving you, then we know that we can create space and systems in place for you to then do what we deem as a crime. And we know that our prison system was then the next form of involuntary servitude. And that just continued to build, even when we look at redlining. So then redlining comes about. So now we're moving past Reconstruction, and we're seeing that folks are trying to buy houses, and people are coming back for more, and they need places to go. We see little suburban neighborhoods popping up all over the place. However, Black folks couldn't get loans and didn't know why, aside from the fact that they're Black. However, banks had maps of communities, and they didn't necessarily come out saying that if you lived in a bad community, a Black community, that you didn't qualify for a loan, but they labeled these communities as bad communities, and literally had them marked in red. And so it was known that if you lived in this community and you were trying to go somewhere else, it was a dub for you. And in the piece itself, it talks about how, like, when we look at it says, but good neighborhoods were all white. The bad neighborhoods were highlighted in red on maps, so bankers and investors knew not to give loans there. And if you lived in a bad neighborhood, this continued to be a cycle. The legacy of redlining lives on. Over 74% of the neighborhoods that were labeled as bad neighborhoods by banks from redlining are today the lowest income neighborhoods in America. And these neighborhoods are still predominantly non-white. So we know that folks literally collected data on where Black folks lived, where we shopped, where we worked, and then created these labels to put on top of them to where we wouldn't have the ability to step outside of that space. And when we talk about the ways in which poverty is a cycle, this is one ways in which we look at history and we look at data at its forefront of how it's used to continue systemic racism that still plagues us today and prevents many Black people, a majority of us, from still being able to break out a cycle.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah. Only thing.
So there's the whole episode. Without Ken, we out.
Yeah, I think only thing I would add to that, I mean, great job. Only thing I would add to that, I think all those forms of data collection that they did on slaves, that was applied to capitalism in general and to just labor in general. So I was listening to the author of Accounting for Slavery. Was listening to a podcast. She was on the book Accounting for Slavery, and she was saying how when she looked at the old records, she found that when she looked at old like records of like factories, white people were leaving factories so much they couldn't keep any data on them. But since slaves were stuck on a plantation, she said that was some of the most reliable data about how to coerce your workers and how to get them to move. And then she studied plantations in the West Indies and how there would be, because in the West Indies, you know, there was majority black folks. That's how Haiti, you know, was able to happen. So there would be like 1,000 black people and maybe like 20, you know, or maybe a little more than that, but would be way outnumbered white slave owners and overseers. And she was like, well, how did they keep them in control? But that's where they learned those ways of keeping workers in control. She talked about how they would have watchmen. They would get older slaves and have them sit outside of plantations and watch the other slaves and see if they were trying to run off. And they would coerce them into telling, into snitching, essentially. You know, they had snitches on the edge of the plantation. And, you know, they had rating systems, like Cameron was talking about. So they used to rate it by hands. You were a 1A if you were 18 to 30 black male. But if you were anything else, you might be 3/4 hand, 1/2 hand, 4th hand, something like that. And ratings. So we see with rating systems, what we're about to get to with Ryan and Terrell, like rating systems is something that, you know, occurred during slavery, but we still have rating systems, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they didn't view you as a valuable slave because they liked you and thought you were a good person. If your value was measured by how much you could produce, how much you could work. You know, how much cotton could you pick? How well were you at skilled work like sewing, or having an excellent cook was something that made your value go up because of your ability to produce more, not because of the quality of like your character.
Right. So when we go back to surplus value, again, the idea of profit and extracting the most you can get out of someone, that's universal to capitalism. But the main specimens, particularly in the American context, were slaves. But this is not, as we always say, white people will eat their own. So this is not limited to slaves, you know.
At all.
Right.
But these algorithms that they build in through collecting this data has, you know, is that's the data capitalism that's happening throughout the time span of capitalism. And it's like, how can we extract the most profit? So one more point on slavery, and I'm gonna kick it to y'all. Like, they looked at, you know, what are the surges with cotton. You know, when is it at its highest? When is it at its lowest? And they found that within like maybe even like 50 years later, they had charts to show that slaves are more productive than they were 50 years previously. And they accounted for these things. They accounted for how productive they were. So when you go to your jobs, everyone goes through testing and gradings and ratings and all of that stuff. I was even reading one of the first salaried employees in America was overseers on plantations. You know?
Oh wow! That puts a lot of things in perspective.
So again, it was a very sophisticated system. This was not just white people with whips that just didn't like black folks. That's not what this was, you know. So so yeah, just
when I was younger, I used to wonder why. Yeah, I mean, slave owners would allow, you know, slaves to get married. Like, why do you care? And then when I grew up and I started working, and you get that whole work family thing, and then I was like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, and I think
because they're taking our sense of marriage, sense of community, and trying to see what they can, how they can twist.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
to produce.
That's a great point. Yeah,
you're incorporating that sense of family into the business model.
Yeah.
So
that's
like
a good point.
When you ready to take your vacation, it's like, oh yeah, I'm about to you know, take 2 weeks off, you know, get some rest and relaxation. Well, you know, Terrell, the family needs you, man. We kind of need you here on this day. It's gonna be a busy
right. Yes.
To get more labor out of you, so you're not using your vacation time. You're not, or if you're sick, you're letting your brothers down, man. You're letting your brothers down. You're letting your team down.
Exactly.
It's like, wow, I'm sick. What do you want me to do? And I like as soon as like when she said that, it just jogged my memory. And when I learned about that,
because psychologically you don't want to let your family down, right?
Exactly. And like I said, I didn't understand why they would let slaves, have communities, go to church and do this. I get the church part, obviously, but the marriage part kind of threw me off when I was younger. And then I got a job and I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and we're not, and for the record, before somebody takes it there, we're not saying that slavery is, as our ancestors experienced it, is the same thing as our jobs, like it's the literal same thing.
No, we're literally saying that they use some of those same models to produce labor that they did in slavery with us today. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you. So, yes, I'm going to let y'all take it.
My next section is going to be on Amazon. I just want to preface my section saying that the Amazon model is built off a guy who thinks, Jeff Bezos, who thinks people are inherently lazy. So I want everybody to keep that in mind. So for the first example of data capitalism, we will look at the major multinational corporate juggernaut, Amazon.
That's Jeff Bezos.
And like I said at the beginning of the episode, fuck Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, run it.
For real. So delivery driver Adrian Williams was one of the first employees to let it be known that Amazon required all drivers to download an app called Mentor, which tracks drivers, giving them arbitrary scores based on unknown criteria. So according to Amazon, Mentor is an app for drivers of delivery service providers. The app is supposed to help improve drivers' safety, measuring how their actual driving behaviors, scoring them each day, and providing in-app coaching.
So we got tracking. What we just talking. We got ratings.
We got ratings.
we okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. That's what Amazon says.
Yeah.
However,
data mining.
Yeah.
Exactly. However, accounts from the actual workers who are using the app tell a different story. Amazon requires their workers to download the Mentor app onto their personal phones, allowing them to track their employees at all times of day. All times a day. If an Amazon delivery driver were to download it onto their work phone, also known as a rabbit, which is a colloquialism that he used within the Amazon delivery firm, it would be more prone to a glitch. So, for example, if you were to use your work phone while a delivery truck is running, you get docked on your score. Having these low scores can result in disciplinary actions like being taken off the work schedule, losing your bonuses, being removed from your delivery routes. And based on the score, drivers will have their pay determined. So since the criteria is unknown, there's no way to know how to improve your scores or how to contest your score that you receive. If your score is too low, you'll be in danger of being terminated from your job. So this puts the workers in a catch-22 where they have to choose between being tracked at all times a day or risk losing your job.
And they got more packages that they got time to deliver a lot of times anyway, right?
Exactly. Some on one of the videos, it said the route was like 100 something stops, 185 stops or something like that. So yeah, you're overworked, you're being tracked. And we're gonna learn more about this bullshit app as time goes by on my part. And without knowing any of the criteria, you can't improve your score. And some people are liking this form of surveillance to slavery and sharecropping, where you're basically trapped within a system of labor and you don't have any say in how things are operated. Also, the Mentor app is known to glitch on your personal phone as well. So you're getting docked for trivial occurrences, such as you get a call from your loved one, your family, as Terrell noted. Even if you don't answer, you're still getting docked on your score, which is complete bullshit. I was angry when I heard that. And some delivery service partner firms then approve to have their workers have extra phones, the work phones, basically. Some firms didn't provide their workers with extra phones.
They had to use their personal phones.
They had to use their personal phones and download the app onto their personal phone. And so they're being tracked off the clock.
Off the clock? Fuck that.
Off the clock. Exactly.
So in order for me to have a job, provide for my family at Amazon, which is like the biggest employer here in Indianapolis and
in most places.
Yeah. I got to download this app. If they don't provide me a phone that I still got to keep on me if I don't have to turn it in at the end of the day. But I got to download this app onto my personal device.
Exactly.
That's already tracking my movement while I'm at work. While I'm at work. Who's to say that it's not, but whatever. But I got to do all this to get my paycheck. And then even then, because there's glitches within this algorithm that they don't tell us how the algorithm even computes or anything like that, because they probably can't even explain it. Most algorithms, they really can't explain. They just plug the information in and it generates this, even though they created this. And they won't release, what these algorithms are or anything like that. And we're just supposed to go along with it, download it on our phone. Because the people that are going to affect, people this is going to affect the most are people of our skin color, because we need these jobs.
And we work there more than, black and brown people. I used to work at Amazon, for the record, so I'm loving this because this is personal.
I was there for all of 2 weeks and quit on my birthday.
But
I still think it's wild that they literally track if your body is moving.
Yeah,
exactly.
And if your body is not moving for a certain amount of time, then you're docked for that. You're literally penalized for possibly standing still for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, when you, again, somebody used to work there, you wear a badge that tracks your movements, as y'all been explaining, even if you're in the warehouse. So this doesn't just apply to people inside or people who are driving around. This also applies to people who who work within the warehouse. So what we used to do was we always just walked around, even if we wasn't doing shit. The rule was you just walked in circles. You walked around, you did random sweeping, because if they knew you were standing, they send you home, and then you don't get those hours. So yeah, that's definitely how it works.
When I was there, they didn't have that tracking, but we had to keep our handhelds on us at all times, and they would track the data that we input on there. And if we're not putting something in within a certain amount of time, then you got a manager walking up to you, "Hey, Terrell, you all right? You good? What's going on?" And I'm like,
yeah, and people think that, when you are using your Nike app or you got your Apple Watch on and it's just tracking your movement and your step counter and all of that, which is really great. But to just think that that's siloed and it's only that same type of data set is not also being used for capitalistic purposes is wild. They're also using that to target folks for the type of shoes that they want you to buy, to put out more athletic wear, or even more heinous things like tracking people at work. And
tracking people at work and off work.
That for me was crazy, because I was like, when I first heard about this at Amazon, I was just like, okay, well, where on earth did they come up with this from? I'm like, and then I instantly thought about how many people have like an Apple Watch or your step counter in your phone that counts all of that stuff. And I was like, that's wild.
Yeah, it was something, I didn't read this quote earlier, but something Mark said. He said, kind of what you were saying, Cameron, as far as how there's, on one end, it seems like it's beneficial, but on the other end, it's not. He said, what appears on one side as a loss of value appears on the other side as surplus value. What appears on one side as a minus appears on the other side as a plus. The capitalist class of a given country, taken as a whole, cannot defraud itself. Wow. So again, like, that's it, not to get too deep into Marxism, but what we call like dialectical relationship between things. They feed off of each other. So the benefit of something keeps you going, while on the other end it's exploiting someone. But the benefit and the exploitation need each other to coexist. So there's always going to be a product that we want that's cool based on data that is probably being used somewhere else at an Amazon facial recognition, because we like facial recognition on our phones, right? We can just put the shit in front of us. We ain't got to type it or whatever. But then that's being used to arrest niggas or whatever. So like that's just capitalism through and through, to Cameron's point.
Yeah, that was a good point. So not to mention the Mentor app, if you go look at this up on Google Play and read the reviews, has an average score of 1.9 out of 5, and that's out of 1,270 reviews.
No app. See, this is another thing. No app that we use for fun would ever fly with at 1.9 or whatever. You like, we wouldn't use it. It would be out of business. You know what I'm
exactly.
saying?
But
like
since it's used, I'm sorry, my bad.
If Facebook was a 1. What was it? 1.5 or
1.9?
Well, if Facebook was 1.9. No, nobody would be on Facebook because like that's a shitty app. Like, you know, those apps you download that you like, you're like, man, this shit don't work.
You got to think that's 1.9. That's not even of the people that like everybody that downloaded that actually left a review.
Exactly.
It probably would score worse if everyone actually left a review.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's like Vine. Vine doesn't exist. That's as bad. That's pretty bad. Yeah. Now, if you look at the Mentor app on Apple Store, it holds a 1.5 rating out of 5.
Oh.
That's based on 43 reviews. So the people have spoken. This app is a major issue for the workers. So also, some people believe there's something more sinister at play here. The arbitrary ranking, the scoring of this Amazon app, and excessive low scoring may be part of a plan to keep Amazon from paying bonuses and benefits to their workforce. So you have workers like Adrian Williams who are fed up with the treatment and decided to protest Amazon and their unfair work practices. Amazon workers from Richmond, California, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Bessemer, Alabama, many other places all join in this protest to basically, protest the unfair treatment of Amazon.
I thought Amazon said Black Lives Matter, though.
Ooh.
They only matter if they can make money off of us.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Black dollars matter.
There's that value minus worth thing. Yeah.
Fuck them. I'm sorry. I just got all the smoke for Amazon right now. I want to give a big shout out to Adrian Williams. She was part of that video when we were doing the research. She was afraid to pull over, but she got heat stroke and was afraid to contact her Amazon superiors and ended up in a hospital. That's the conditions these workers are living under.
Apply to companies that just truly don't give a fuck about folks. Like when we think about Amazon, Walmart, majority of service jobs, like there are so many essential workers, like essential workers. I mean, I think back to the story of the mom who had her kids in the car while she did a job interview and they arrested her for it. The
one that left her kids in the hotel and they arrested her for it.
And it's just like, that's not negligence. She literally had AC running. They were fine because she wanted a job to be able to provide. Or folks who, have had to call off for emergencies and then come back and they're like, that's cool, but you don't got a job now. And it's like, these corporations do not actually care about you as a human. They only care about you in the capacity of what you can provide for them. And some folks don't have the liberties to be able to say that I'm going to put myself first regardless because I have the footing to stand on and I have the support too. And these corporations, they live to pry on us as essential workers specifically because they know that for many folks, there is no other option.
Right.
So you will sacrifice yourself. You will sacrifice your mental, your emotional, your physical body in order to show up every day because you don't have a choice. And they utilize that knowledge by knowing your zip code, knowing your address, knowing the neighborhoods you live in, the access that you have, and by building up these fake ass team and family situations so that way you feel indebted.
Yeah, and I think Terrell just nailed it with that. I never thought about that, but I mean, I we've all been at work when they're like, we're family, we're like, fuck it. But I never made that connection back to slavery. Like that was a good connection.
Oh yeah,
that was.
Yeah.
Thank you. literally like at call center jobs, and it's like they swear at call center jobs. It's so crazy because like you'll be that one person missing, and they're like, you come back, oh Terrell, the place just wasn't the same without you. I feel like work morale was down, and this, that, and the third, and then you got to be here for the team, bro, for the family, and all that. And I'm like,
nope.
I was going for one day. Facebook's business model, or how they make money, is targeted ads, right? So you look up a watch on Google, look up a watch on you search in marketplaces for whatever you're looking for. Then next you see ads for it and stuff like that. We get it; they're targeting you for that. So here's where Facebook allowed advertisers to use racial prejudices within these ads to filter these ads, basically. So companies were basically allowed to pick and choose who they wanted to advertise to. And these filters would advertise to people who were most likely to buy those products or who they wanted to buy those products or services. So for example, like say, I don't know, say I got a new housing complex or whatever, since we were talking about redlining earlier. Say I got a new housing complex and I want to advertise it everywhere. I'm putting it on Facebook, Google, anywhere. But specifically on Facebook and social media, I don't want niggas living here. Right. So within those algorithms, they actually had the choice to basically pick and choose who they wanted. They were able to filter out groups by their ethnic affinity.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I remember that part.
So ethnic affinity, which basically color folks, and whites being the default.
Right, and there was no, if I remember that story correctly, there was no option to do that to white people.
No, white people were
you couldn't be like, I want to just, you could say I don't want to target niggas, but you couldn't say I don't want to target white people. There was no category for that, correct?
Right. And that goes back to your point. In capitalism, white people will eat their own.
Yeah.
Because with these ads, the way you can target them, so me reading through the article and everything and just doing my research, I'm just thinking, so if I have a housing complex where I want to advertise to new white couples, all I got to do is just deselect African-American, deselect Asian Americans, deselect Hispanics, Hispanic Americans, Mexican Americans, whatever. And I only can advertise to them because that's what I want in my neighborhood.
And this is illegal, correct? And if you want to do this as a realtor, that's illegal, right?
It's very much illegal.
Yes, yeah. That was
highly illegal.
There was a Housing Rights Act and all of that. Yeah, the Civil Rights Act of 64.
Now, in contrast to only advertising to who they wanted to advertise to, not contrast, I'm sorry, but we'll just say on the flip side, maybe I have certain products or services I only want to advertise to minorities, African Americans, Hispanics, whoever. And that could be any product or service that, anyone can get, but I specifically want to target this group because they're low income. They need this product for one. And this could be like payday loans and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. White people in certain areas, they don't give a fuck about a payday loan. They got money.
Right.
So it wouldn't make any sense to advertise a payday loan to them. But if I can advertise and market this payday loan to African Americans who generally don't have the funds, they need a pick me up to get between checks or whatever, then that's, if I can specifically advertise to them, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, people poor and desperate.
Yeah, same way with any like loan function car companies. You don't see, I'm sorry, I don't see, and y'all viewers may not know about Oak Motors, but
woo,
bro,
don't even go down that road, man, because that's a whole nother conversation,
bro.
Don't even.
But like, if I'm advertising for that company and whatever, and because I know of Oak Motors and I know the predatory lending that they do, I'm going to specifically target a certain group of people because other groups of people, they're not going for this. They got better options. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's where they fucked up at. And what they're saying now, basically, after a class action lawsuit that happened, that settled back in March of 2019, what was it? They basically, took those options away. Right? And I don't know, my term for it was like digital redlining, because I can literally mark off the people that I don't want to see my product, services, or anything like that.
No, I think that's a good way of framing it, and that's essentially what it is. I mean, sometimes I think people get a little too cutesy with these, like, framing the digital stuff as some of the former stuff, but like in that case, yeah, and
I'm guessing, I'm going into it with a solution for what Facebook did with advertising and what we move forward with, as far as if you want a solution, is basically calling the shit out and moving forward with legal action, because that's what had to happen. But even then, with the legal action that they took in the class action lawsuit that happened, Facebook, you can still be targeted for ads based off of your wow, I cannot say that word today. Ethnicity. So
ethnicity, your age,
your gender, any of those factors, your location, which me and Ryan will get into in a second here, as far as other products and stuff. They can still, discriminate against you for those things, just simply because you have a profile pic. And even then, like, which made me laugh, because my fiance was like, "Damn, that must be crazy for really tan white people."
Like the olive skin
and we know we know some of these algorithms he's fucking up. So especially the facial recognitions. But yeah, I mean, they're able to. I think it said that they can use those things you were describing as proxies for race.
Yeah.
So they can't, and we know that's how a lot of this works, right? Like, we can't necessarily.
I can't say.
Yeah.
Like, it's basically putting a whites only sign that only whites can see.
Ooh. Oh.
Like,
yeah.
My man's dropping the heat. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That is.
Even when you get on Facebook and maybe you're looking, like, because you can find anything on Facebook Marketplace. If you're looking for jobs and stuff like that, if certain things like this were still around, you wouldn't see certain jobs that you may qualify for.
Yeah.
And to take it a step further from, what was it, Coded Biases, the documentary?
Yeah, Coded Bias, yeah.
Yeah, Coded Bias. So the documentary, one of the things they went into, and this kind of, like, when I was watching that, this kind of scared me a little bit, because what they did was they posted one ad, right? Just a little, you guys remember it. They posted one little ad or whatever, and they posted it to 63 million people. And this was in relation to the 2016 election. That one ad that they posted to those, 61 million people, just to test it out, drew over 300,000 people to the voting polls. What could happen?
Right. That falls into the wrong hands.
Yeah, there's potential good, but there's potential good, but there's a definite evil.
Right. If you can sway elections, you can get people into power that is going to pass certain policies that you're going to benefit from as a major corporation.
Right. And exactly. I think, and they said in the doc, that was just if Facebook hadn't admitted that, no one would have even known that.
Exactly. And do you remember?
That's scary.
You remember in the 2016 election, like, how many votes it was just a difference of being one way or the other?
It was 100,000
exactly.
up in Wisconsin, essentially. Wisconsin and Minnesota, and not Minnesota, Wisconsin and Michigan, essentially. But and we just and you know, not that elections are the go-to for saving things in the first place, but
I'm
it's
just making
still,
that
that level. Say what?
I'm just putting that point out there. That level of power.
That level of power is real. Like, that's what I'm saying. Regardless of how people feel about elections, that level of power is real. And the thing is, Facebook's not accountable to anyone. Now, I would argue, you were talking about solutions. I would argue you have to go even further than just. That's just
really the solution that's just the solution they offered. But you know, legal action. But it's definitely, like you said, a lot further, because legal action, usually what happens is they fix one minor thing after.
Yeah, and then they come up with a new scam. I don't think I mean, again, if we're talking about capitalism, I think we just need to accept that this shit doesn't work. And therefore try something else, as opposed, because even out here, like, okay, let's break them up, and we're gonna deal with some of this on the second episode. You know, hopefully when we talk about digital colonialism. But even if you try to break it up, so to speak, you looking at you know, when they say they want to break companies up, what that means is they want to create more competition within that market. But competition is what's still driving this. So yeah, maybe Facebook won't be as big. Like, they're talking about maybe they'll make Facebook sell back Instagram and sell back WhatsApp or something like that. But those apps still are going to be predatory, you know. So whether they're owned by Facebook or not, you know what I mean. So I think it takes a little bit more. But anyway,
especially if they break it up and it's not regulated.
Yeah, I'm just saying, and again, even regulation, we're looking at, you know, that's a revolving door, you know. So you just got people going in and out. So I'm just saying. Yep. So yeah. Again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that, because we can deal with that in the next episode. Even
with like you said, regulation and stuff like that. It's Facebook. It's super easy for them to suppress things like that.
Yeah, they own the code. I think. I mean, to kind of bring it full circle to algorithms and just kind of give some more tech breakdown. Like, they own the propriety of the code. We don't own their code. I mean, if you want to get into like more technical tech shit, it's like what we call open source, where we could see what the code is and we could see what they were doing. But right now it's called what's a black box, because they own that code and nobody can get into that black box, so we don't know what they're doing. They can disclose certain things, but there's nobody that can stop that, because they own that code. And they don't just own that stuff. Doesn't just dictate us in America. That stuff dictates people even around the world, right? You know.
But yeah, so the next section, car insurance. We're gonna start this off with a Chicago resident by the name of Otis Nash, who is being charged $190.69 a month for his Geico car insurance. However, if you go across town to Lakeview, which is a more white commercial part of Chicago, you have another resident by the name of Ryan Hedges, who's been paying $54.67 a month.
Same coverage. Even though the vehicle crime rate in that white neighborhood is higher than it is in the black neighborhood.
So according to
that's a colorblind algorithm right there.
Exactly.
Like I said, digital redlining. They literally going off of a zip code from a poor black neighborhood. Even though this
Go ahead, Terrell.
Even though this man could have an impeccable driver record, which they take that into account, I guess, but still, could have an impeccable driver record. His age, that's a factor and everything, but still, poor black neighborhood in comparison to probably someone who's around the same age as him, same gender. Maybe they even take marital status into it.
No wonder my car insurance so goddamn high. I should have checked the white box.
I really want to do just a comparison, just for here in my location, because y'all know I'm in the hood all day.
I'm thankful enough that
do a
the
social experiment.
Just to see,
and really held it down, because this is just a scam already. And just knowing the ways that in which insurance companies just discriminate is also crazy. Also, jobs too. Don't put your address on a job application and stop putting your address on your resume.
Bro.
They use that shit to figure out where you live, and whether or not you and assess your value before you even see your credentials. Knowing where you live used to be a way to be like, oh, they live too far to commute. They're more likely to call out. That's a data set.
And if everybody hears how we're so passionate on these subjects, is because we have these grievances. We've experienced this.
Yeah,
so,
we've worked at these. This isn't like I said at the beginning. We gave you theory. now we're giving you the real, and that's the beauty of it is we can tie it together. Like, yeah, this affects people on a mass level, but this is also like we're all working class people, working class Black people. So this affects us as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anything else y'all want to say on that.
No, there's still more.
Yeah, so according to a ProPublica article, on average, from 2012 to 2014, Illinois insurers paid out 20% less for bodily injury and property damage claims in Nash's predominantly minority zip code than in Hedges' largely white one. According to data collected by the state's insurance commission. However, Nash pays 51% more for his portion of his coverage than his white counterpart, Hedges. There seems to be a noticeable difference, a noticeable trend, I should say, along racial lines in the way car insurance is charged. For years, insurance companies like Geico, Allstate, Liberty Mutual, and many others were caught charging as much as 30% more for insurance in predominantly minority zip codes than white zip codes. The trend has been consistent in states like California, Texas, and Missouri. Even though there are laws in many states that ban discriminatory rate settings, Consumer Reports and ProPublica are still finding examples of minority neighborhoods getting charged higher insurance premiums. Now, some people might liken this, and my brother Terrell said redlining. Some people liken that to redlining, where financial institutions would deny services to Black people based on their zip code. However, there is a term called reverse redlining, where instead of denying services to people of color, you're actually providing them with services, but at higher rates than the white counterparts. So you're charging. So as reverse redlining, where you're charging these Black people higher insurance premiums, and knowing damn well some of them can't pay it, but you do it anyway, than their white counterparts.
None of this is democratic. And I think that's another thing we just need to point out. Like, none of this, like Terrell was saying, none of this is democratic. We don't have any control over this. And I think that's what we really got to consider. It's not that the algorithms are just quote unquote racist. Because again, it's not the algorithms that are racist, because algorithms are expressions of humans, particularly white ones. So, the algorithms are only racist as a proxy, to use that word, of, the system that we're already under. But it's not just that they're racist, but again, we have no democratic control over these things. These things are left in the hands of private corporations that, have, pretty much run the world. So I want to close on this. This isn't about evil companies. Fuck Amazon, fuck all them. They're evil, but not because they're like Jeff Bezos is just a bad guy. This is the type of dynamic that capitalism sets in motion. This is what gets normalized. In order to be successful, you have to be Jeff Bezos. You have to be that type of person to be whatever is labeled as successful, because that's the type of human relations that capitalism sets in motion. It's not cooperative, it's competitive, and since it's about profit, you're always going to do what's more profitable. So even if you aren't individually racist, if you know that it's more profitable to take advantage of Black people, then you're more likely to do it. If you know that it's more profitable to not, advertise to this company, that you're more profitable. You're going to make more money. It's more profitable if you do it. if you know, in regards to social media, that if you can learn all these little tasks that someone does, yes, it's extremely coercive and extremely invasive, but that's how you make money. So I'm saying we can't just think about it like these companies are evil in this kind of individual sense.
Yeah.
This is the type of activity that gets set in motion when you launch a system like that.
You breed an environment that pushes these personalities to positions of power, like you said.
Yeah, and they pay big money for your data.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it's worth something. They pay big money, just like the whole Juneteenth thing.
Soon as it became a federal holiday, and best believe there will be companies, department stores that are going to have Juneteenth shirts and merchandise for sale.
Right, Cameron's job's already doing it, but
best believe that's going to happen.
If you call yourself a white ally who listens to our show, and I catch you acting a fool in these streets on Juneteenth, just hands.
You don't catch these hands.
Yeah, we could actually just close on that. I think we clearly debunked, this, and check us out for episode 2. Where we're going to deal more with the international implications of big data and the international implications of data capitalism, or what is going to be coined in the next episode, digital colonialism. Yes, so check us out for that. But thanks for listening. This was a dope episode. This one was a little more personal. Some
wounds got opened up.
Yeah, right. There's some of the other ones, but sometimes it just be like that.
I'm gonna end it with saying fuck Amazon.
We can't say that enough.
Yeah,
that's gonna be our new tagline.
Fuck Amazon, all the way through and through. Thank you. Peace out.
Peace out.
Okay. Fresh out the plane in a whole nother state. I'm tryna eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the hood. I just told them be safe in the state.